All right, 310, we are going to look a little bit further into our field experience and what it requires, what you'll have to do while you're in the field, what is the finished product that you'll turn in. So hopefully by the end of this video, specific to field experiences, you'll have your questions answered. And if there's any more that are remaining that I've not answered by the end of this video, please feel free to email me. So we are going to start as we talk specifically about our field experience. All of the information as far as how you will be graded is in our syllabus. So we're going to start there. If you go to the very end, once we're past our assignments and all of that, we're going to start here where we talk about the time that you're going to be in the field. So again, I mentioned in our week 2 video that if you are currently a TA in classrooms, it's not going to be hard for you to get your hours because you're there. So it's not like these hours have to be above and beyond what you're doing, but I want to make sure that you're able to have you get your total hours, but you're also able to do the intervention groups as a part of that time. So if we get into it and you're having a difficult time getting some time to be able to do some intervention groups, please let me know and we'll figure out a way to work it out. But this is typically a field experience that is at least 20 hours or 30 hours or more. So for those of you who are in the field, this is kind of an easy way for you to get some bonus points because the minimum is 20 hours in the field. There is no maximum. If you have 20 to 24 hours in the field, that gets you your base of 100 points. Now, that doesn't guarantee you 100 points because it depends on how you score on the rubric, but you'll get 100 points as the maximum total. If you are in the field 25 to 29 hours, then you get your base of 100 points because you've met that 20 to 24 hour requirement, plus 5 extra points for going over and above and beyond. And then the same is true if you do 30 or more hours. You will get your base of 100 points plus 10 extra points if you reach that 30-hour or more mark. So here is how it really breaks down, just so that we are able to connect how many total field experience hours with actual hours per week. So we have already completed one of our 8 weeks in our course, so that puts us here at the 7-week mark. So if we were to start this week and we're in the field, then if your goal is 20 hours for that base of 100 points, then you need to average 2.8 hours per week. If you're shooting for 25 hours, you're going to try to get 3.5 hours. And if you're looking for 30 hours, you want 4.29 hours. So, if we don't get your groups up and going until next week at 6 weeks, it's okay, it's still possible, but the number of hours per week will increase the longer we wait to put you in the field. So again, for those of you who are already in the field as TAs, you'll be meeting this time requirement, but you need to make sure that you're putting in specific times that you are observing or teaching your groups. So please make sure that you're doing that so that you can keep track of these times so that you get the points that you are earning plus the extra credit if you need to. So if you have any questions about the time minimum in the field, please let me know. But here's how it breaks down for an 8-week course. All right, let's look at our rubric and I'll kind of walk through. So the first majority of the rubric is going to be based on your observations and reflections. And so it connects to your intervention groups, but there's kind of it's one rubric, but there's really 2 parts. So if you're looking at our indicators here on the left, our setup, introduction, growth mindset, classroom learning environment, classroom assessment practices, reflection, questions, look-fors, citations, and works cited. Everything to that point is based on your observations and your time in the field. That does not necessarily have anything to do with your intervention groups. Then where we start with group, log, session notes, data from the teacher, data from the student, and summary of student growth with group experience reflection. Those are all specific to your intervention group and the time that you're spending with them. So this is going to be 5 pages typed or more. double space, 1-inch, 12-point font, and title your paper, please. 5 pages seems like a lot, but I promise you, once you start looking at these rubric pieces, it's going to fill in pretty well, and you'll get to 5 pages before you think. So in the introduction, you're going to talk about a general overview of the paper, a thesis statement at the end of your initial paragraph. Make sure that it's easy to read. There's no major distracting errors or things like that. It's just kind of a summary of what we're about to get in your reflection paper. Then you're going to write a reflection or review of growth mindset practices or not in the classroom. You're going to be giving examples and non-examples and evidence from EDUC's mindset and suggestions for implementation or strengthening. So if in your placement or where you are placed as a TA right now, if you are seeing evidence of growth mindset based on what we're reading in Carol Dweck's mindset, then you're going to share that here. What are the things that you are seeing? What is the evidence from her book that is supporting that? And then what are some suggestions for implementation or strengthening? So if you're seeing it happening, what are some suggestions for taking it to the next level? If you're not seeing it happening, then what are some suggestions to maybe start that? And know that that is somewhat out of your control and that you are able to implement growth mindset principles with your intervention group. But as a TA, you may not be able to do that in your classroom or partner classrooms with your colleagues. Certainly, I encourage you to have conversations with your cooperating teachers and just kind of plant the seed of growth mindset and see what happens. Then we're also going to be looking at classroom learning environment. So it's important that we look at the classroom learning environment. Is it a respectful environment? Are students engaged? Are they doing real world work about or within the content area? And just overall, how is the classroom learning environment? That has a lot to do with growth mindset and assessment practices because we have to set that tone. Classroom assessment practices. So you are going to write a reflection or review of assessment practices. So what types of assessment are given? Is data being used to inform instruction? So if your colleagues are giving assessments, are they using that data to inform their instruction, or are they just moving ahead with their plan to teach because that's what's next in the teacher's edition? Teacher feedback. So is teacher feedback happening? Is your colleague or partner teacher providing students feedback based on the pretest or the tests that are given? And if they are, is it specific to the students, or is it just kind of general, here's how the class did overall? Because student use of teacher feedback is important. So if we as teachers are providing feedback to our students, it's not just enough to say that we put it out there and I've provided you feedback, but it's important to make sure that we are seeing if students are using that information to go to the next step. Then you'll also include a reflection piece about the visit or your time there. Make sure you include a positive, at least one suggestion, and make sure that it doesn't have any distracting errors as you're writing. One question, or you may have many, but at least one question that's included based on your observation or your visit. The look-fors is going to be based around something that is called the context for learning, which is your keyword or response for week 2. So the context for learning is something that I will show you. We have an attachment for, we'll go into. But that's what is going to be here for that look-fors document. And then because we're citing from 2 sources, so you're citing from Carol Dweck when we're here in this growth mindset part of your reflection, and then we're going to quote from or refer to the Popham Classroom Assessments book, and that's going to be in this piece right here. And because we're citing information from those textbooks, it does need to be cited using APA format, and that you will have a works cited page then. If you do decide to go kind of above and beyond and find additional sources, please make sure they're also cited in APA format and they're included in your works cited. So let's take a minute and look at what this context for learning is. If we go into our weekly content, and now we're in week 2, you will see here's your video for week 2 specific, here's your discussion board for week 2, and then here is the context for learning. So this is kind of an initial, what is my classroom, what does it look like, what's the learning environment overall. So you're going to complete this. You don't necessarily have to complete this actual document as long as when you're writing that part of your reflection, you're answering these questions. So what type of school do you teach or are you observing? All but one of you are in an elementary school, and I think everyone is either rural or suburban, but it just kind of depends on where your placement is and how you feel, where you're located according to the Raleigh area. So the second one is to list special features of your school or classroom. So if there's anything, some of you have mentioned these in your week 1 discussion boards, but if there's anything particular to your school, please make sure you share that here, because it may be something that will impact how you're observing or teaching in this classroom. Also describe the district, school, or clinical teacher requirements, expectations, or scheduling that may affect some of your delivery of your intervention groups or of your observation time. So if there's anything that just needs to be made aware, please make sure that you include that here. Now for the next part, you have to kind of put your lens on for the role that you're playing. So for all of you who are elementary, you're going to focus on literacy. If you're in another content area, if you're not BK, elementary, or SPED, then you're going to focus on your content area when you answer these next few questions. So if you are elementary, which most all of you are, how much time is devoted each day to literacy instruction in your classroom? That could include if they're doing literacy within other content areas. So how much time is devoted to literacy? Is there any ability grouping or tracking in literacy, and does that affect your class? And identify any textbook or instructional program that you use for literacy instruction. If there's a textbook, please give me that information just so I know where you're coming from. Sometimes we're put in placements or we are in schools where we don't have as much choice over how we deliver the content, and so it's based on the teacher's materials that we have. So if that's the case, that's why we're asking that question. So these three, for the student who is not in elementary, you will answer these questions according to your grade and content area. Then I also want to know your specific grade level. So a lot of you told me your school, but I don't know what grade level or levels that you work with. The number of students in your class, males and females, and then some specific information here. So do you have students who are on an IEP or 504? What does that look like? How many students? What are your supports and accommodations that you have to give? Because both as a full class when you're teaching and in your intervention group, we have to honor that information, make sure we're meeting that need. But then we also have other students in our class, our other AIG, our EC students, ELL, struggling readers, students below level. So how many of each of these students are in your class that you are in or you're observing? And then just kind of give a little bit of explanation. So some of this information may have to come from the clinical teacher that you are with, or the teacher that as a TA you are partnered with. So please make sure you find that information. All right, let's go back and look at our group. All right, so our field experience group. I will get more into this information as we approach, because we're going to have to make sure that we have some assessment data to form these groups. So you're going to have a group that's between 1 and 4 students. They're working on the same skills, and you're meeting with them for at least 6 sessions for 20 minutes each. You're going to maintain a log of your dates and your tutoring sessions. You're going to have session notes for each session. It's basically a lesson plan, but you need to know the standard that you're going to be working on. All of you in elementary are going to be doing reading. We're not going to be doing math. And then the person who's placed in the other content area, you'll do that content area. Your materials that you're going to need, your student work, your pre-assessment information that you have, strengths of the lesson, areas for growth, and what is a challenge of this lesson. You are going to be tracking data that will start from pre to post assessment on student growth within your group, but your students should also be tracking data. It is critical for them to know where they are and where they're going and how they're progressing in between, so that should also be happening. The summary of student growth, at the end of your group, you're going to include a summary of that data. And so that needs to be, this information that you're tracking here is what's going to be included as you reflect here. And then your group experience reflection, overall, the group experience. So you're reflecting on that. So that is your rubric for your observations, your site visits, your field experience, and your intervention group. There will be another short video to follow with a few more details.